A new life under protection. Living as a perfect wife. I used to believe danger had a shape. Cold steel, loaded guns, men with too much power and too little conscience. I was wrong. The real threat was far quieter. It lived in reflection, in silence, in the parts of me I kept buried so deep no one could ever find them. Now I live in a place where everything looks safe. A neat house with a painted fence, sunlight falling perfectly across trimmed lawns, neighbors who smile like nothing in the world has ever gone wrong. I smile back. I wear soft fabrics, speak gently, move carefully. I answer to a name that still feels like it belongs to someone else. Here I am, flawless. Polished. The kind of woman people assume has never known fear. They have no idea how many lives I've already lived, or how quickly this one could vanish if the truth ever slipped through. Half a year ago I was no one worth noticing. Adrian Hale. Just another analyst buried in spreadsheets and fluorescent light. I liked numbers because they didn't lie. They didn't judge. They didn't change when you weren't looking. My apartment was small, forgettable. Nights blurred together with cheap meals and the hum of the city bleeding through thin walls. It wasn't much of a life, but it was safe. Predictable. At least that's what I told myself. Because there was always something else. Something I only allowed to exist when the world wasn't watching. It started small. An impulse I couldn't explain, a quiet curiosity that refused to disappear. The first time I stepped outside who I was supposed to be, it felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. I remember the mirror most of all. The shock of it. Not just fear but something else. Something lighter. That feeling scared me more than anything, so I locked it away. Buried it under routine, under normalcy, under the version of myself everyone expected. Daytime was control. Night was escape. But only in fragments. Only enough to survive. People like me don't get to want more. That's what I believed. So I kept it contained. Until everything unraveled. It started with a mistake. A file left open, a detail that didn't belong. Numbers that didn't add up. At first I told myself to ignore it. Close it. Walk away. But something pulled me back. Patterns emerged the longer I looked. Money flowing in ways it shouldn't, names that carried weight, connections that felt wrong. It wasn't just accounting anymore. It was something bigger. Something dangerous. I didn't realize how dangerous until it was too late. 3 days later there was a knock at my door. They didn't waste time. They didn't need to. By the time they finished explaining, I understood exactly what I'd stumbled into. The company wasn't just bending rules. It was part of something far worse. A system built to hide money, power, and crimes that never made headlines. And now, I was part of the problem simply because I had seen it. The choice they gave me wasn't really a choice. Help them, or face whatever came next alone. So I stood in a courtroom I never wanted to enter and spoke words I could barely get out. My voice trembled. My body refused to cooperate. And across from me, the man I exposed watched without anger, without fear, just quiet certainty. Like he already knew I wouldn't escape him. 2 weeks later, Adrian Hale ceased to exist. Everything was erased. Records rewritten. History replaced. I expected something simple after that. A quiet relocation, a chance to disappear into the background where I belonged. Instead they handed me a life that felt like a performance. "Your name is Elena Hart now," the handler said. I remember laughing because it sounded absurd. Unreal. Like a role meant for someone else entirely. But no one else was there to take it. And just like that, I wasn't hiding anymore. I was becoming someone new. "They can't move a lone male witness tied to something this big," he said almost casually. "Too exposed. Too easy to follow." My throat went dry. "I'm not married." He didn't hesitate. "You are now." That was it. No build-up. No softening. Just a sentence that snapped my life in half. "For your protection you'll be placed as a wife." In that moment, fear stopped being something sharp and sudden. It stretched out, endless, like a horizon I couldn't reach or escape. I wasn't just running from my past anymore. I was being sealed inside a life that wasn't mine. One where even my own reflection could turn against me. Before I could choose when to disappear into that hidden part of myself. Now there was no choice. No off switch. This wasn't something I visited in secret anymore. It was something I had to live. Every hour. Every day. The house they gave us looked like a lie someone would believe without question. Clean white fencing, trimmed grass. A street so quiet it felt staged. The kind of place where nothing ever goes wrong. Or at least nothing anyone talks about. The neighbors smiled like they already trusted me. Like I belonged there. I smiled back. Inside those walls, though, nothing was real. I wasn't the elegant woman they waved to each morning. I wasn't anyone's devoted partner. I was evidence. A liability. A carefully constructed illusion wrapped in soft fabric and practiced gestures. And the man beside me, the one I was supposed to call my husband, was part of that illusion too. Daniel Hart. Former military. Signed to me like the house, the name, the life. He knew everything about me, every truth I had tried to bury. And yet he was still a stranger. But he wasn't the part that unsettled me the most. It wasn't the people we were hiding from either. The real threat was quieter. It lived in the stillness, in the moments when I stood alone and looked too long at my own reflection. Because something had started to change. If pretending to be Elena began to feel natural, then what did that mean for Adrian? The question lingered longer each day, heavier each time it returned. They tell you the rules of witness protection are simple. Stay alive. Stay unnoticed. Don't stand out. What they don't tell you is what it costs. Piece by piece you stop existing. The morning after we arrived, I woke up in a room that didn't feel like mine, next to a man I had studied on paper but didn't truly know. Daniel stayed to his side of the bed, leaving a careful gap between us, like a line neither of us intended to cross. It should have made things easier. It didn't. My attention drifted to the chair across the room. Everything was laid out with precision, clothes chosen for me, a life arranged down to the smallest detail. Soft tones, flowing fabric, dresses meant to be seen, not hidden away. There was nothing secret about them. These weren't for stolen moments in the dark. They were for daylight. "I'll give you 20 minutes, Daniel said from the doorway. His voice was calm, controlled. "People start walking their dogs soon. It'll look strange if you're not out there." "Not you, Elena." The name still didn't settle right. It felt like someone calling to a person just behind me. "I don't know how to be her," I said quietly. He studied me for a second like he was measuring something I couldn't see. "You don't have to be perfect," he replied. "Just convincing." Then he was gone. Silence filled the room again, heavier this time. And there I was, alone with no distractions, no excuses. Just a mirror waiting for me to look. The dress felt unfamiliar as I pulled it on, like stepping into a version of myself I had always kept at a distance. Every movement felt too deliberate, too exposed. My pulse wouldn't settle. When I finally looked up, I expected to see something off. Something artificial. But I didn't. The woman staring back at me didn't look like a disguise. It's real. That realization hit harder than anything else. Walking outside felt like stepping into a performance I hadn't rehearsed. The sunlight felt too bright, the air too sharp. Every small detail stood out. The crunch of gravel, the hum of distant voices, the faint bark of a dog somewhere down the street. I was certain everyone could tell. Certain they could see right through me. And then, the woman across the street smiled. "Morning, Elena." The name hit me like a sudden drop. For a split second, everything vanished. Who I was, what I was supposed to say, how I was supposed to sound. Just blank. Then the instructions came back, steady and practiced. Gentle tone. Small smile. Nothing complicated. "Good morning." She gave a polite nod and kept walking, leash in hand, conversation already forgotten. And just like that, it worked. No suspicion. No hesitation. The lie slipped into place as if it had always belonged there. That was the moment I realized something unsettling. Being believed was far more frightening than being questioned. It felt like something behind me had quietly sealed shut. Not a slam. Not a dramatic end. Just a soft, final click. The kind that means you don't go back. Because the easier this life became, the more distant the old one felt. Like a memory losing detail with every passing day. Time smoothed everything into routine. Mornings began with coffee and silence. Daniel would sit across from me, eyes scanning headlines, always alert, always calculating. Our conversations stayed safely shallow. Weather, errands, harmless observations about the neighborhood. Even our walks were calculated. Time just right so we'd be seen often enough to belong but never long enough to stand out. From the outside, we looked like any other couple settling into a quiet life. Inside it felt like standing on something fragile, waiting for the first crack. Nights were worse. That's when the question returned. At what point does acting stop being an act? One evening, Daniel placed a small box on the table between us. Cleared, he said. No surveillance. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were heels. Simple, refined, impossible to ignore. My chest tightened. I don't think I need. You do, he interrupted, not harsh, just certain. If we're seen together, it has to look natural. Natural. The word almost felt ironic. I stared at them for a long time before finally reaching out. When I slipped them on, my balance shifted immediately, unfamiliar and unsteady. I caught myself on the table before I could fall. Daniel moved toward me instinctively, then stopped himself, pulling back into that invisible boundary he never crossed. You'll adjust, he said quietly. But it wasn't just about learning to walk. Something deeper was shifting. Not obvious. Not dramatic. Just subtle. A strange calm where panic used to live. A quiet curiosity I didn't want to examine too closely. All of this started as survival. Why did part of me feel at ease? Later that night I saw my reflection, not in a mirror but in the dark glass of the window. Streetlights softened the image, blurred the edges. The figure staring back didn't feel entirely foreign anymore. And for the first time, fear wasn't the strongest thing I felt. Something else had taken root. Something harder to name. That's when I understood the real risk of this life. It wasn't exposure. It was adaptation. The possibility that one day, I wouldn't want to leave. Fear doesn't always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, like a fracture spreading through glass you're pretending is still whole. The night everything nearly came apart didn't feel different at first. Dinner passed the way it always did. Calm, controlled, measured. Daniel spoke only when necessary, his awareness never dropping, his attention always split between me and everything else. At first, I mistook his distance for detachment. Eventually I understood. Attachment creates mistakes. And mistakes get people killed. Still, something about that night felt off. Too still. Too quiet. Like everything was holding its breath. You have somewhere to be tomorrow, Daniel said at last. I paused mid-bite. Where? Neighborhood event. Charity dinner. My stomach sank. Couples only, he added. We're expected. Public space. Unknown faces. Unpredictable conversations. Too many variables. I'm not ready, I said, barely above a whisper. His expression tightened, just slightly, the only sign he ever gave that something affected him. In this life, he said, voice steady, readiness isn't part of the equation. His gaze locked onto mine. You either play the role, or you don't survive it. Sleep never really came after that. The dress waiting for me hung by the closet, pale and still in the dim light. It didn't feel like clothing. It felt like a decision already made. And as I lay there staring into the dark, the memories of who I used to be felt further away than ever. Fading. Blurring. Almost gone. Because the fear keeping me awake wasn't just about being recognized anymore. It was something worse. It was the growing realization that I might already be forgetting how to go back. What if the real danger wasn't being recognized, but being completely forgotten? Morning came too fast, like the night hadn't finished with me yet. Every movement felt delayed, heavy, as if my body resisted what the day required. The brush in my hand shook just enough to betray me. Even the quiet ticking of the clock sounded louder than it should, counting something down I couldn't stop. Getting dressed felt different this time. Not like preparation. Like surrender. The fabric settled against me, unfamiliar and yet no longer entirely foreign. That scared me more than anything else. Each step toward becoming Elena didn't feel like performance anymore. It felt like crossing a line I wouldn't be able to uncross. When I finally stepped out, Daniel looked up. And paused. It was brief. Almost nothing. But I saw it. That flicker, that moment where something shifted behind his eyes before he locked it away again. That moment stayed with me. Because if he could start seeing her instead of me, then maybe everyone else already had. The event was exactly what it was meant to be. Warm lights, soft music, laughter that never went too deep. A room full of people comfortable in their lives. The perfect place to disappear. Or to be found. Each step I took felt too loud, the sound of heels echoing in my own head more than the room itself. Every glance felt like it lingered a second too long. Breathe, Daniel said quietly beside me. Tension stands out. Easy for him. He wasn't pretending to exist. At first, everything held together. Introductions, polite smiles, Meaningless conversations that flowed just enough to pass unnoticed. And then, I saw him. Standing near the drinks table. I didn't know his name. But something about him pulled at my memory, sharp and immediate. Not from my old life. From the courtroom. A connection. A detail I couldn't place, but I knew it mattered. Daniel, I said under my breath. Don't look directly, he replied instantly. I see him. Of course he did. Stay composed, he added. Panic is louder than recognition. But the man was already moving. Every step he took felt like a clock ticking down. Then, a small misstep. My heel caught just slightly. Barely noticeable. But to me it felt like everything slipping at once. Daniel's hand steadied me, firm but controlled. To anyone watching it looked natural, just a husband helping his wife. But I felt the message in it. Hold it together. Nice evening, the man said as he reached us. His gaze stayed on me too long. Not openly suspicious, just searching. Trying to place something that didn't quite fit. I smiled even though it felt fragile. It really is. Pause. A single breath stretched thin between us. Then he nodded and walked away. Relief came too fast, like a gasp after being underwater. But it didn't last. He knows, Daniel said quietly. The words hit harder than the encounter. Then why leave? I asked. Because he doesn't need to confront you here, Daniel replied. Now he'll verify quietly. We didn't run. We didn't rush. We left exactly the way we arrived. Calm, controlled, forgettable. But underneath it, everything was unraveling. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Every passing light looked like something watching. Every shadow felt like it moved just slightly too late. By the time we got inside, I couldn't hold it anymore. The composure shattered. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My breathing came uneven, sharp, like I couldn't get enough air. I can't keep doing this, I said, my voice breaking. I can't keep being her if it ends the same way. Daniel didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, something had changed. The distance in his voice, gone. You're not finished, he said quietly. You don't know that. No, he admitted. But I know something else. I looked at him, my chest tightening. For the first time, he wasn't observing me like an assignment. He was actually seeing me. The real risk here isn't them finding you, he said. The silence between us felt fragile. It's you deciding you were never real to begin with. That hit deeper than fear ever had. Because somewhere along the way, I had started to believe that too. Later, I stood alone again, facing my reflection. Same face. Same figure. But something about it had changed. Or maybe I had. Tears blurred the image, softening the edges until I couldn't tell where one version of me ended and the other began. And standing there, I couldn't answer the question anymore. Which one was the lie? My fingers rose almost on their own, brushing away a small part of the mask. Not tearing it off. Not rejecting it. Just adjusting it enough to see what was underneath. And in that fragile pause, a realization settled in, quiet but devastating. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was becoming a choice. Before I could even understand what that meant, light cut across the room. Headlights. Bright. Sudden. Wrong. A car had stopped outside. Daniel's voice came instantly from the hallway, low but sharp. Stay away from the windows. My pulse spiked. Who is it? He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. Then quietly, too quietly, he said, they might have found us. The house seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the engine didn't shut off. The lights didn't move. Whoever it was, they weren't leaving. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud enough to feel like a signal. Daniel, what do we do? No response. And that was worse than any answer. He moved carefully toward the curtain, keeping himself hidden. Just one look, that's all it took. And something in him changed. Not fear. Not shock. Recognition. The kind that comes when the worst possibility stops being a theory. Tell me, I said, my voice barely holding together. Please. Pause. That's not a neighbor. The air thinned instantly. Police. I asked, desperate for something that made sense. One word came back. No. It landed heavy. Outside, a door opened. Even through walls, the sound felt too loud. Final. Footsteps followed, steady, confident. Not searching. They already knew. Listen to me, Daniel said, turning to me fully now. Focused. Precise. If anything happens, you go out the back. The route we practiced. What about you? A flicker of hesitation. I'll handle the front. No, I said immediately. We stay together. His expression softened for just a second. That's not how this works. A knock sounded. Not aggressive. Not rushed. Just controlled. Which made it worse. Real danger doesn't need urgency. It knows it has time. My thoughts scrambled for logic, for denial. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe. Another knock. Firmer. Hope collapsed. Go, Daniel said. I'm not leaving you. You are, he replied, steady but unyielding. And then he looked at me, not like an assignment, not like a responsibility. Like a person. And that made it harder than anything else. Because somewhere along the way this had stopped being just a cover. The door handle shifted. A soft rattle. They weren't waiting anymore. This is my fault, I choked. If I hadn't. Stop. The word cut clean. You didn't do this because you were weak, he said. You did it because you told the truth. The words hit deeper than fear. Brave. No one had ever called me that. Metal scraped at the lock. Time was gone. Daniel stepped closer than he ever had before. Close enough that the space between us disappeared completely. Whatever happens, he said quietly, you keep going. No matter what name you have to live under. My chest tightened. As for the first time, I didn't know which one he meant. A crack split through the door. I flinched. Go, he said again. This time I moved. The hallway stretched endlessly ahead of me. Every step felt heavier than the last. My breathing uneven, my thoughts breaking apart. Halfway there I stopped. Because something hit me all at once. If I leave, I lose him. The only person who knows everything. Behind me the front door gave way. Voices flooded in, urgent, unfamiliar. There was no time. I reached the back door. But I couldn't open it. Not yet. Something pulled me back just for a second. I turned toward the mirror. The reflection staring back wasn't just one person anymore. Not Adrian. Not Elena. Something in between. Someone who had survived both. A shout echoed from the front. Daniel's voice. Then nothing. Everything inside me broke. Every instinct screamed to go back. But survival pulled harder. Forward. Alone. I stood there caught between two impossible choices. And I understood finally. Walking out that door meant leaving everything behind. Not just the house. Not just him. But who I used to be. My hand closed around the doorknob. Shaking. Final. I started to turn it. Adrian. The voice came from behind me. Soft. Close. Impossible. I froze. Because only one person was supposed to know that name. And he wasn't behind me.